Hello there, you're following World News live from Algiers. Next are the headlines. The Algerian legislative elections are entering their final phase, with nearly 1 million voters from the diaspora set to begin voting abroad on Saturday. Diplomatic and consular missions are finalizing preparations to receive voters as overseas polling stations open. Within the 13th session of the Algerian-Russian Joint Intergovernmental Commission in Moscow, Algeria stressed the importance of expanding partnerships in strategic sectors, while Russia called for broadening cooperation into new high-value areas. Tensions in the Strait of Hormuz have escalated, with Iran warning of consequences for ships sailing outside designated routes. The United Nations has suspended its evacuation plan for the strait following an attack on a vessel, while US President Donald Trump accused Iran of violating a ceasefire by targeting ships. Welcome to the details of our program. First up in our news, Algerian nationals living abroad are set to begin voting on Saturday in the country's legislative elections, with polling scheduled to continue through July 2nd. Electoral authorities have completed all organizational and logistical preparations to receive voters at polling stations across multiple continents. A total of 66 electoral lists representing political parties and independent candidates are competing for 12 seats allocated to represent the Algerian diaspora in the National People's Assembly. The election has also seen notable participation from women and young candidates. The overseas electoral register includes 854,285 eligible voters who will cast their ballots at 439 polling stations located within 129 voting centers worldwide. Algeria is preparing for its 2026 legislative elections, with authorities describing the vote as another step in the country's democratic reform process. The elections aim to strengthen transparency and political participation, with special attention given to the Algerian diaspora, whose overseas voting begins on June 27th. Details with Sofiane Kanturi.
Algeria is preparing for the holding of the country's 2026 legislative elections, a key political milestone that authorities present as another step in the country's broader institutional and democratic reform process. The vote comes after a series of constitutional, legal, and electoral reforms introduced in recent years aimed at strengthening electoral governance, broadening political participation, and reinforcing transparency throughout the electoral process. For the Algerian authorities, the elections reflect an ongoing effort to consolidate democratic practices by expanding political representation while enhancing the integrity and credibility of the vote. Large voters' participation is seen as a central pillar of these reforms. Particular attention is being given to the Algerian community abroad, which the state considers an integral part of the nation's political, economic, and social development beyond its contribution to the national economy. That approach has been reflected in President Abdelmadjid Tebboun's regular meetings with members of the national community abroad. During official visits, it has also translated into stronger parliamentary representation, with 12 seats allocated to Algerians living abroad, alongside a reorganization of overseas electoral constituencies aimed at ensuring fairer representation and giving the diaspora a stronger voice within the Algeria's constitutional institutions. The overseas vote is being organized through close coordination between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Independent Election Authority, whose responsibilities have been expanded following institutional reforms to oversee every stage of the electoral process, from preparation and organization to supervision and results management. Voting for Algerians abroad will take place over 6 days, starting from June 27th to July 2nd, at polling stations set up in Algerian embassies and consulates around the world, allowing members of diaspora to participate directly in choosing the next National People's Assembly and reaffirming their role in Algeria's political life.
Algeria's National Independent Election Authority has conducted a remote simulation exercise with heads of the country's diplomatic and consular missions abroad ahead of overseas voting, which begins on Saturday. According to the authority, officials from more than 120 embassies and consulates took part in a remote training session and a full simulation covering all stages of the voting process. The exercise tested the technical and organizational procedures to ensure that the polling stations are ready for election day. The Algerian Consulate General in Paris has completed all logistical and organizational preparations to receive members of the Algerian community for overseas voting in the legislative elections, which begin on Saturday. The consulate says all polling stations are fully equipped following awareness campaigns to encourage voter participation and coordination meetings with election officials to finalize voting arrangements.
We are here to prepare for the legislative elections. We are extremely important for our country. Young people need to understand the importance of these elections. The Algerian Consulate in Paris has provided all the necessary material and human resources to ensure that these elections are conducted successfully.
Nous sortons d'une campagne de sensibilisation.
We launched awareness campaign for the Algerian community regarding the legislative elections. Through this initiative, we reached out to several community associations and members of the Algerian diaspora in France to encourage greater voter participation. Despite the higher temperatures and the holiday season, we observed a strong interest among the community in taking part in the vote. This morning, we also reviewed the final preparations and relocated polling stations to make them more accessible to citizens. We ensured that all organizational, logistical and material arrangements were in place. In addition, we met with election supervisors and polling station managers to brief them on their responsibilities. Tomorrow we will be fully prepared to welcome our community as they come to cast their votes.
Campaigning for Algeria's legislative elections continues on Friday for an 18th consecutive day. Ahead of the July 2nd vote, candidates and political party leaders are stepping up their outreach efforts, focusing on major cities in a bid to win support ahead of polling day. Political parties and independent lists are competing to convince more than 24 million eligible voters in an election seen as a key milestone in renewing Algeria's legislative institutions. Algerian Minister of State, Minister of Hydrocarbons Mohamed Darkab on Friday co-chaired alongside Russian Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Patrashov the 13th session of the Algerian-Russian Joint Intergovernmental Commission on Economic Trade, Scientific and Technical Cooperation. Speaking at the opening, Darkab said the meeting reflects the strong historic ties between Algeria and Russia and the depth of their strategic partnership, adding that bilateral relations continue to gain momentum through the shared political will of both countries' leaders to build a comprehensive and sustainable partnership.
The holding of the 13th session of the Algerian-Russian Joint Intergovernmental Commission for Economic, Trade, Scientific and Technical Cooperation reflects the solid historical friendship and deep strategic partnership between our two friendly countries. Today, our bilateral relations are witnessing renewed progress, reflecting the shared political will and strategic vision of the leaders of both countries.
Algerian Minister of State, Minister of Hydrocarbons, said that the hydrocarbons, mining and energy sectors represent key areas of promising cooperation between Algeria and Russia, given Algeria's significant resources and Russia's technological and industrial expertise. He stressed the importance of further developing existing partnerships and expanding them to include new projects in oil and gas-related processing, industries, renewable energy, as well as the peaceful use of nuclear energy in a way that strengthens energy security and supports economic development.
تبرز قطاعات المحروقات والطاقة
The sectors of hydrocarbon, energy, and mining are among the most important areas capable of giving our partnership a new strategic dimension, especially in light of the rapid transformations taking place in the global energy sector and the challenges they pose relating to energy security and sustainability of supplies. Partnership in these areas constitutes a fundamental lever for economic cooperation between our two countries, which is reflected by the activity of a number of Russian companies in Algeria, particularly in the fields of oil and gas and nuclear energy for peaceful and medical purposes.
Mohammed Arkab also highlighted Algeria's efforts to develop the hydrocarbon sector and improve its investment attractiveness, particularly through the international licensing round launched by the National Agency for the Valorization of Hydrocarbon Resources. He said that Algeria looks forward to the participation of major Russian companies in this bidding round, as well as in various further energy projects.
أما في قطاع المحروقات فإن الجزائر
As for the hydrocarbon sector, Algeria continues its efforts to strengthen international partnerships in the exploration, production, and development of oil and gas fields. In this context, the launch of the international bid round represents a significant step towards enhancing the attractiveness of the Algerian mining sector and the attractiveness of foreign investment. We look forward to the active participation of Russian companies in this round, as well as in the various future energy projects.
Russian Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Patrushev stressed the importance of expanding cooperation with Algeria into new high-value sectors. He underlined the strong potential for joint investment projects in energy, industry, education, health, culture and sports, and welcomed existing cooperation between Gazprom and Sonatrach. He also expressed Russia's readiness to strengthen its presence in Algeria and share expertise in gas, renewable energy, and the peaceful uses of nuclear energy.
We are proud of the historic ties of friendship that unite Russia and Algeria, and we believe that our bilateral cooperation is in line with the long-term strategic interests of the peoples of both countries. There is no doubt that direct communication between the leaders of our two countries helps consolidate trust-based dialogue and strengthen relations between the two sides. I would also like to emphasize that Algeria is one of Russia's most important partners in North Africa. Trade between our two countries recorded remarkable growth over the past year, while positive indicators continue to show further progress in the current period. I hope that the work of this Commission will help identify new prospects for developing and strengthening our strategic partnership.
До обсуждения вопросов повестки передаю вам слово.
The 13th session of the Algerian-Russian Joint Intergovernmental Commission on Economic, Trade, Scientific and Technical Cooperation held Friday in Moscow concluded with the signing of the final report by Algerian Minister of State and Minister of Hydrocarbons Mohammed Arkab and Russian Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Patrushev. The two sides also signed several agreements and memorandums of understanding covering customs, cooperation, tourism, labor inspection for employment, promotion, pharmaceutical inspection, cultural heritage, preservation and meteorology cooperation. Algerian ambassador and permanent representative to the African Union Mohammed Khaled, head of Algeria's delegation to the 7th Conference of States Parties to the Pelindaba Treaty in Addis Ababa, reaffirmed Algeria's commitment to strengthening nuclear security and sustainable development in Africa. In his address, he stressed Algeria's commitment to the treaty's principles and its support for African efforts to prevent nuclear proliferation, promote disarmament, and reinforce a culture of nuclear safety and security. Algeria has been elected as a member of the African Commission on Nuclear Energy during the 7th Conference of States Parties to the Pelindaba Treaty held on June 25th and 26th in Addis Ababa. This marks Algeria's 6th consecutive term in the body, reflecting the confidence of African Union member states in its role and contributions to implementing the treaty's objectives, promoting a nuclear weapon-free Africa and strengthening cooperation on the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. The election is part of Algeria's broader presence within African Union institutions, underscoring its active role in supporting continental initiatives and advancing African cooperation. Algeria has reaffirmed its commitment to strengthening and revitalizing the United Nations to make it more representative, effective, and capable of addressing contemporary challenges through collective action and the promotion of the UN Charter. Speaking at a General Assembly session marking United Nations Charter Day, Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Ammar Benjamin, said the UN has long represented for Algeria a beacon of legitimacy, the rule of law, dialogue, and international solidarity, adding that it remains more than ever the key platform for advancing peace, development, and cooperation among states.
For Algeria, President, the UN has long represented a beacon of legitimacy, of rule of law, of dialogue and international solidarity. And today, more than ever, it remains indispensable, irreplaceable in advancing peace, promoting development, and fostering cooperation among nations. We also recall that sustainable development and the eradication of poverty in the world remains among the most pressing global priorities.
A so-called Gulf Sea Route Management Authority has warned of the consequences of maritime traffic passing through the Strait of Hormuz outside the routes designated by Iran. According to Iran's IRNA news agency, the authority said that any shipping movement outside the specified corridors would not be guaranteed safe passage, and that ship owners or operators would bear full responsibility for any resulting risks or incidents in the wider Persian Gulf region.
Vessels passing outside designated routes are not covered by the Safe Passage Guarantee, insurance, or related liabilities. Any consequences arising from unauthorized routing would be the sole responsibility of the vessel owner, charterer, and master.
Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi said that safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz cannot be guaranteed without coordination with Iran, warning that any deviation from agreed agreements would lead to the suspension of designated routes. In a post on his account on X on Friday, Garibabadi cautioned that maritime safety in the strategic waterway would not be assured if nuclear agreements, alternative routes, or decisions made without Iran's as a coastal state are adopted.
Safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz under vague arrangements, parallel routes, or decision-making outside Iran's considerations as the coastal state is not guaranteed. Any valid framework must be based on coordination with Iran and the provisions of paragraph 5 of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. Otherwise, the result will be the suspension of the designated parallel routes.
The UN-affiliated maritime organization has suspended its program for escorting ships and seafarers through the Strait of Hormuz following a reported suspected attack on a cargo vessel, reviving concerns over maritime security in the region. The UK Maritime Trade Operations reported that the ship was struck near Oman shortly after Iran warned vessels against using routes it has not approved. Two unnamed US officials told Reuters they believe the vessel came under fire from Iran, while an Iranian-linked maritime authority reiterated that ships outside designated routes cannot be guaranteed safe passage. US President Donald Trump said that Iran launched at least 4 attack drones toward ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz, adding that one of them struck the deck of a cargo vessel. In a post on his Truth Social account on Friday, Trump claimed that U.S. forces shot down 3 other drones and described the incident as a violation of a ceasefire agreement he said had been reached between the two sides.
The Islamic Republic of Iran shot at least 4 one-way attack drones at ships traversing the Straits of Hormuz. One of the drones solidly hit the upper deck of a large and very expensive cargo carrying ship. Damage was done, but the ship was able to proceed on its way. We knocked down 3 other drones. Obviously, this is a foolish violation of our ceasefire agreement.
Iran has described the joint statement issued by the United States and the Gulf Cooperation Council as containing what it called irresponsible, provocative and interference-based positions. In a statement released Friday, Iran's foreign ministry reiterated that the Strait of Hormuz should be managed in coordination with the Sultanate of Oman as a coastal state and in accordance with the terms of a memorandum of understanding signed with the United States. It also said that the U.S. military presence in the Gulf is a source of insecurity and regional division. The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, has stressed the need for what he described as a deep and very rigorous verification system in Iran following the war in the Middle East in order to ensure it does not develop nuclear weapons. Speaking to journalists in Japan on Friday, Grossi said he believes the goal of any Iran-US agreement is to guarantee that Iran does not acquire nuclear weapons. He noted that Iran's government has clearly stated it does not intend to do so, but added that intentions alone are not sufficient.
The sometimes less than clear statements from one or the other, or contradictory, I should rather say, contradictory statements, owe a bit to that factor, that this is political positioning. But in reality, there is an agreement, and to comply with that agreement, the IAEA will have to have access and inspect. So the process, as you know, last weekend we were in Bürgenstock in Switzerland, where initial conversations have taken place. So I expect this work to pick up soon.
3 Lebanese were killed and 2 others wounded on Friday in Israel occupation strikes in the southern regions of Nabatea district and Tyre district, according to Lebanon's official national news agency, citing the Ministry of Health Emergency Operations Center. An airstrike targeted a car in the town of Mifdoun in Nabatea, killing 2 people and injuring a third in what it described as a violation of the ceasefire agreement. The agency also reported that a 3rd Lebanese was killed in Syria and another was seriously injured in a drone strike on the town of Mansouri. Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem said on Friday that Israel has no option but to withdraw unconditionally from southern Lebanon, reiterating his rejection of normalization with Israel. In remarks broadcast on Al-Manar TV, he called for a full Zionist withdrawal from all Lebanese territory. His comments came during Ashura commemoration in Beirut's southern suburbs, where large crowds gathered in a major procession displaying Hezbollah flags and Iranian banners.
Israel has no option but to withdraw completely from every inch of our Lebanese land and to end its aggression by air, land, sea, and in every form. Israel must leave unconditionally. The only acceptable solution is the full restoration of Lebanon's territory, complete sovereignty for Lebanon, and no partial occupation of Lebanese land. Israel must leave humiliated and defeated, and that is what will happen.
Venezuela's acting President Delcy Rodriguez announced on Friday that the death toll from 2 earthquakes that struck the country has more than doubled to over 920. Speaking during a televised meeting with military and civilian officials, Rodriguez said the revised figure rose from a previous official toll of 589. She added that rescue teams are continuing intensive efforts to find survivors trapped under collapsed buildings.
So we've got over 50,000 people missing, over 500 people dead. So a massive job to go through the rubble. Of course, the threat of aftershocks as well. So the rescuers are going out into amazingly complex conditions.
This is the end of our news program. Coming up is our special coverage program with Miriam Zian.